So please use Q&A section for asking questions, and after the presentation is over, I'll be more than happy to answer all of them. So without further ado, sorry about the delay. Let's get on with our presentation. First, what I would like to demonstrate is that we in 2.10 added a couple of new devices, and first among them is GRIDSMART camera. So how does that integration look like? There is a new icon and a new device type that can be added from both map or a list view. There is a tooltip for that device that will display basic information about the unit ID, name, camera status, and camera time zone and date time. Please also note that the color of the icon will change depending on the camera status. So when we receive the status information from the GRIDSMART device, the camera is active, unknown, missing, or it's not configured in ATMS. Depending on that, different colors will be indicated: blue for active, yellow for unknown, pink for missing, and gray for not configured. Beside that, if you would like to see more information in device properties, device info tab will have additional information in terms of what is the temperature the device is measuring right now, what is the software version, voltage, etc. But the most important part is the video feed. Just by simply double-clicking the camera icon on the map, you can basically get a new window in which the fisheye view of the GRIDSMART camera is displayed. Secondly, we added a new device type for pod base station, and the icon is displayed on the right-hand side of the slide. Double-clicking the icon will automatically launch the Pod Connect software from the base station for that particular location. So instead of you having to do it manually through the browser, if you're already looking at certain location in your ATMS and you would like to open Pod Connect, you're just one double-click away. What changed in the edit database section of the ATMS? I have a pleasure of announcing that the way how you would view and program MMU and CMU permissions has changed. So instead of having one very long row of fields where you can check or uncheck permissions, now the display is in triangular matrix, which is aligned with Trafficware's MMU card. So that makes it much easier to use and compare between how permissions are programmed on different platforms. Other than that, other database updates basically bring that the new parameter that is added to the V76 controller software for Ethernet link speed is also added in ATMS. The issue with peer-to-peer port number is corrected, and we improved the tab loading speed, which means if you open the edit database screen in ATMS and if you switch between tab categories, the loading of the categories will happen faster than before. There are a couple of user experience improvements, so let me please demonstrate those. First of all, I would like to start with flex group assignments. What does that mean? That means that at the time of creating a new controller, you can assign that controller to one or multiple flex groups. You remember that previously you would have to create a controller, then separately switch to definitions tab, and in definitions tab add it to a specific group or a flex group. Now you can do that at the time of creating the new controller, so you don't have to go through multiple screens, and you can do that either while creating a controller through the list or map view. Also, from the definitions tab in ATMS, you should be able now to create device or events with their position. Basically, you can, similar to when you're creating a controller, you can click on the magnifying tool icon, and that button will launch a mini map where you will select what is the location of the device or event that you would like to add, even if you are not on the map screen. There are a series of changes with regards to ATMS reports, and let's see what those are. First of all, I would like to stress out that there are a couple of filter criteria improvements. So there are additional criteria that are added in the dialog box before you run your report. From version 2.10, users should be able to run volume occupancy per lane, turning movement count report, split history and split timeline report per flex group. Previously, user would be able to generate the reports only for one intersection or one controller at a time. Now there is an option to generate the report for a series of controllers that belong to a flex group. Additionally, split history, split timeline, and field alarm reports has two new criteria as well. First is days a week, where you can select if you want to see data only for a specific day of week. So for example, you select 3 months or 1 month, but you want to see only Fridays. You can basically select only Fridays in the section for split history, and only data for Fridays will be returned back. And finally, there is a new criteria called time span type. Time span type has two potential values, continuous and intervals. And in order to explain how it works, there is a small graphic underneath the lower section of our slide. Basically, we have 3 days. Let's say we have selected 3 days in our report selection criteria, and we selected the time from 8 a.m. until 3 p.m. Okay. In case if time span type is selected to be continuous, the report will start on the first day, 8 a.m., and retrieve all the data till the last day, 3 p.m. Okay. In case intervals is selected as a time span type, system will look at this time difference from 8 a.m. and 3 p.m. and provide only data for 8 a.m. and 3 p.m. for day 1, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. for day 2, and 8 a.m. till 3 p.m. for day 3. This gives you a much better flexibility in terms of what kind of data you're interested in, and report output can accommodate your needs better. Additionally, we added to the extension reports. Consequently, 2 alarms are added, first in the controller software and then in ATMS as well, where alarm number 35 is added for pedestrian phase extension, and alarm number 36 is added as red clearance extension. Therefore, we have 2 reports to showcase those 2 extension types. When a user wants to create a report, there are 3 options: to create a numerical report, which is displayed in a formula table, which you can see on the left-hand side. And that report will show the ID of the intersection. It will show the date. It will show time when an event happened, which pattern was running at that particular time, which pedestrian phase in this case was extended, and what was the duration of that extension. Okay. The upper section of the report shows the ID, shows the name of the controller, begin end date, begin end time, and the settings about time span we just talked about, report type, flex groups, etc. Second option for creating the report is cumulative graph. Basically, what does that mean? That means all extensions for a selected time period will be basically grouped, and they will be sorted according to their duration. So we see here that extension with a duration of 3 seconds happened 2 times. Extension with a duration of 12 seconds happened only 1 time, and happened for phase, in this case, 6, because phase 6 is labeled to be red. Phase 2 is labeled to be phase 2. At the very bottom of the graph, you will see the ratio of different extensions for the entire selected period, or the entire selected group of locations. Additionally, extension reports basically can also show the third option, which is the timeline graph. And the timeline graph will show each and every instance when extension happened. It will show which phase by color and for how long. So we can see that the vertical or y-axis indicates the extension duration. Color indicates which phase was extended. At the bottom, there is a summary. basically for the selected controller and the selected time frame, the entire number of cycles is selected, and then depending on if an extension happened or not, the color is changed. So in this case, we see that in 96.96% of cases, there were no extensions. So basically, majority of cycles experienced no extensions for any phase. And then there is a smaller number of cycles where only phase 4 is extended, small number of cycles where only phase 2 is extended, and a little bit larger number of cycles where more than one phase is extended in the same cycle, and that is labeled with orange color. Okay. These extension reports can have multiple filters. So we already mentioned time span type and report type. However, you can also select phases. You can see all phases, or maybe if you're interested in only checking a particular phase in a report for an extension, you can basically narrow down your search and look for only specific phase. At the bottom of the screen, you can see that there is a new entry in the controller section called extension reports. And in order for you to select, do you want to see pedestrian phase extension or red clearance extension, you have to select the alarm, which is pertinent for a specific report in the dialog box for the report selection criteria. Additionally, we added my report category in ATMS report section. You remember that the report section had more than 80 reports, and sometimes it was difficult to navigate and find which reports you were interested in as a user. So in order to save time and make the experience of using ATMS better, we created a new category where each user can add frequently used report types to the category. How would you do that? You just need to click on any report type you would like to add, and in the selection criteria of the report, check the box Save to My Report. At that point, the report type will be added to My Report's new criteria, and the checkbox in the newly added column in the list view of all reports will be checked. So you will be able to see from all the reports which ones you already have added, even from the old controllers view, old reports view, or from My Reports view. There are a few other report modifications. We reconcile the time format across all reports to show 0 to 24 hours format. Previously, there were a couple of reports that would show AM, PM, so we reconciled all those, and all reports are now consistent and show 0 to 24. We added a scroll bar to the reports filter dialog box, so even users that access ATMS through, let's say, some remote clients like Citrix, etc., and have some, strange resolutions and have hard time navigating to all parts of ATMS, now should be able to reach all options in the report selection criteria. We also added minimum split, maximum split, standard deviation, 50th and 85th percentile values for the split duration in the summary table at the end of the split history report. You remember that split history report already had a summary table that showed the force off, gap out, and max out instances. We expanded that summary table to include all the entries I just mentioned, as you can see in the example at the bottom of the slide. Also, I'm very happy to say that all reports in ATMS are now converted to DevExpress report engine, which means that there are no legacy Crystal reports anymore. And an issue that was happening when auto report was created with split history by using a signal name is resolved. There are a couple of security improvements that ATMS 2.10 brings, and let's see what those are. First of all, we encrypted all the configuration and utility files in ATMS. And as you can see on the left side of the screen, this is how the configuration file will see if someone tries to open them. Basically, only Trafficware will have the capability of decrypting files and modifying those configuration files. Anyone basically who would open these configuration files will not be able to read any sensitive information from those config files, which means no IP addresses, no database connection strings, so nothing of that kind would be visible for anyone who unauthorized who would by any chance access the machine where these configuration or utility files are stored. Additionally, ATMS from the version 2.10 supports the TLS 1.2. That is basically the security protocol for exchanging the data. It supports new encrypting algorithms. So it will increase the security posture of ATMS. And finally, from version 2.10, ATMS will support, beside the FTP, also the SCP protocol, which will be used for file transfer between any Trafficware controller that has V6 engine board and an ATMS. There are a couple of modifications that happen in the intersection layout, and I would like to start with turn properties. We added turn properties in the upper section of the intersection layout, and there are two options. If the lane is channelized, so if you see an example over here, southbound approach rightmost lane is channelized. So previously there was no way to explain that a lane was channelized, and now we added that property. So it's known that lane actually that vehicles using that lane do not have to wait for traffic signal because they're practically going around the aisle. Also, we added the bay or a pocket, and additionally in this location you see if the bay is selected, an additional field for length of the bay is also added. Example is on the northbound approach of the intersection on the right hand side, where you see that what is the length of the particular bay, and we know it is bay because it's opening. It can be on the right hand side, it can be on for the left turn, does not really matter. If that is the case, there are basically two actions: select bay and enter the distance. This information will be used in the future for different calculations. At this point, we're adding it for you to be able to explain your intersections completely. Also, we added a few more detector purposes, and we redesigned the way how you assign the purpose of detectors in the intersection layout. So previously, there were combinations of detector purposes. Now, to make it simple, we separated all the options, and user can make any combination in case a single detector is used for multiple purposes. Then user can basically select multiple of them and save in the intersection layout. About curbside and downstream types. Those detector purposes are intended mostly for calculating turning movement count for the intersections where agency use in-ground detection. What does that particularly mean? When you have mixed lanes, like an example to the right, where you have through left or through right mixed lane, and if you have a detector before the stop line, it is difficult to know how many vehicles continued through and how many vehicles made a turn movement. ATMS even before added the possibility of adding share percentages and subtract detectors. However, it's additionally improved now by adding curbside and downstream detector purposes. In this particular case, detector 4, as you can see here, should be considered a curbside detector. It's added in the rightmost lane at the radius. So basically only vehicles that go to the right will be the ones that will actuate this particular detector, and then that information will be used for right turning vehicles. The difference between what detector 3 and detector 4 calculate will be added to the through movement. If we're using the example for the left lane, detector number 5 over here, detector channel 5 should be created as a downstream detector. What does that mean? It goes downstream from that particular lane, so which means after the center of the intersection. Okay, so in this case, we declare the detector D5 as a downstream. How does the calculation go? Anything that detector 5, any vehicle that detector 5 basically collects during the time when phase 2 is active will be used as the left turning vehicles. and the difference between D2 and D5 will be used for vehicles going through the intersection. So let's cover a couple of these examples. I just explained the option number 1. How would you program that? You would create a detector number 2 as a TMC detector, turning moment counts, or a combination, and you would create detector 5 as a downstream detector. You see that there are abbreviations, and if you select multiple purposes, there will be a list of purposes for a detector that is assigned to this specific detector channel. So if we have both defined, under the detector number 2, we select the calculation type to be subtract detector. And since this particular lane has 2 movements, through and left, there is only 1 field enabled. In this case, we say, okay, subtract, this is detector 5, and whatever detector 5 counts, we will add it to left. If you click on this dropdown, it will show left or through. So you get an option. Whatever specific detector counts goes to this or that particular movement. In this case, it's left. So let's take an example of basically detectors 2 and 6. The same lane, but you're using the downstream detector, which is not for the left turn movement. It is basically for through movement. In that case, you would still create detector 2 as TMC, and you would create detector 6 as downstream. However, selection here under the subtract detector would be different. Then you would select detector number 6 to count only for through movement, and then the difference between 2 and 6 will be added to the remaining movement, which in our case would be left turning movement. Usage for curbside detector is explained in the middle. Create a detector number 3 as TMC, create detector number 4 as curbside, and under detector number 3, say, okay, we are doing subtract, and detector number 4 will be added to right, which means that the difference between 3 and 4 will be added to through. Additionally, there are modifications for shared percentages as well, and the modification is that now even for left through right lane, basically lane from where vehicles can make any 3 movements, can be covered by shared percentage as well. In this case, you can see at the lower right corner of the screen, both share percentage fields are enabled, and you can select what is the percentage that will be added for the left movement, what is the percentage that will be added to the right turning movement, the remaining portion of the volume detected by detector channel 17 will be added to the remaining movement, which is in this case through movement. We added one new pedestrian crossing type, and that is pedestrian scramble. It can be created through the intersection layout as well. If you select the pedestrian crossing icon at the bottom, that will show up as the 3rd option, and the 3rd option will basically add a pedestrian scramble in the center of your intersection. This is how it will look like in the intersection layout. And on the left-hand side, you can see how the actual icon for ped scramble will be added at your intersection. Naturally, that icon will be able to change signal indication colors as programmed in ATMS. There are a couple of changes that happen in the alarms dashboard. And what are those? First of all, a scroll bar is added to the filter list. So even in case when a user creates a large number of predefined filters and save them, now they will be you will be able to basically scroll down to the bottom and select any of them. And even more importantly, we improve the verification of connectivity between ATMS and alarms dashboard. In certain cases, it would happen that the dashboard would disconnect from ATMS and would basically not collect all the alarm information. In order to prevent that, we changed the mechanism for verifying the connectivity. So it is much more accurate, and when the connectivity is interrupted, the components will automatically attempt to reconnect. That is the first aspect of it. And the second aspect of it, even if reconnecting is not possible, ATMS will store all the data locally, and upon reconnecting again, alarms dashboard will basically collect all the data that were not added due to the lack of connectivity between dashboard and ATMS. With these two modifications, there should be no more discrepancies in data, in alarms data between ATMS and the alarms dashboard. There are a few changes on timing sheets. So we basically enabled the expanded option for dynamic timing sheet to work for V76 controllers as well. And there is a small modification where in the basically modified date, we added what is the time when a specific database configuration that is printed is saved last time. So you can see, okay, I have a timing sheet for a standard database, and that standard database in this case was last time saved on April 22nd, 2020 at 11:35 a.m. There are changes that happened in the Excel export templates. As advertised before, the data export from ATMS has changed, and it changed to the better, because previously ATMS would export the data for Excel export templates in a format where there are multiple parameters with the same name. And these Excel export templates would basically use the search, which would be locational. In this range of fields, find something, for example. Now the output is changed in such a way that each parameter from the database has a unique name. So there is no more need to search for parameters in specific ranges, which was causing issues previously. And why was causing issues? Every time a controller software is modified, new parameters are added, new options are added, the list of those parameters shifts, okay? And if enough parameters are added, that list may shift just enough that basically parameter you're looking for comes outside of the range where you expect the parameter to happen. So in order to circumvent that problem, and in order to solve it and make it future-proof, now each parameter is unique, and basically all formulas can use simple VLOOKUP formula types to find that value, no matter where that value is in a specific sheet. So a location is not important anymore. In that way, even if parameters are added in the future, it is irrelevant. Nothing will be affected because now the formulas do not rely on the location. And there are a couple of other enhancements I wanted to bring up. And those are, a scout is added as a controller type in ATMS. Also, there is a separation of alarms and events depending on the controller programming, which means depending on what the permanent file shows, if a specific alarm is set up only as an event or as an event and alarm as well, there will be a difference how ATMS will handle those situations. If it's set up as an alarm as well, then the icon for alarm will show up next to the controller entry, let's say in the list view. If it's set up only as an event, it will not show up as an alarm icon, but it will be visible in a report and it will be saved in the database of the ATMS. Additionally, the logic for updating for the status of ATMS components is changed. What I'm talking about are four bulbs at the lower right corner of ATMS. You can see the target is to have them all four green all the time. But what has changed? Basically, we changed the way how we determine if a component is inactive or experiencing a malfunction. So we realized that our previous way of determining that is not completely accurate. So that has changed. And additionally, instead of having just one color, now there will be two colors. So please pay attention to the left-hand side, the inner and the outer color. Outer color will show component status. So in this particular case, is that component running or not running at all? And the inner color will display connectivity. Can ATMS reach to that component, or ATMS cannot reach to that component? So in the lower example, we can see that admin is not only disconnected, but it's also not running because we see a red circle around. If admin was still running, but for some reason ATMS cannot reach it, then only the central portion will be yellow and the outer circle will be green again. The upper portion where all the outer circles are gray would happen only if health monitor service is not running. However, health monitor service should be running for in your systems in order to successfully track the status of components inside the ATMS Signal System Central software. Additionally, we incorporated a link to the ATMS user guide to basically help you out to reach the latest documentation which is pertinent to your particular ATMS version. You will still be able to access manuals from the manuals button over here. However, those manuals will be local manuals which are saved in the folder on your server. But help button will take you out to the internet and take you to the basically web page, which will show you exactly what is the ATMS user guide document, which is pertinent for your particular ATMS version. In that case, you don't have to search around for the latest manual. You are one click away from opening it. Also, ability to automatically update alarms in the selected details tab is added. Previously, that screen would update at the moment of opening. Now it will behave more like recent alarms or alarm history tabs in ATMS. So anytime a new alarm happens for that particular controller, it will automatically be updated and added to the list of alarms. And finally, we updated access media control links. So basically now 7.20 and 7.3.10.1, which is the newer package, are both available. And previously we had reported that that link was broken and customers were not able to download the access media control. Now those links are valid and you should be able to download in case you have the need to do that. Some other improvements are we enable the deletion of duplicate scan elements. If you remember, some of you after the data conversion and introduction of the intersection layout noticed that there were a couple of let's say duplicate scan elements. Someone even called them orphan scan elements. And those could not be deleted. Now that is corrected. So if a specific icon is duplicate and it's not added in the intersection layout, you will be able to delete it. If the scan element, let's say arrow or a pedestrian crossing, is not duplicate and it exists in the intersection layout, you will not be able to delete it from the map, but you will be able to modify and delete it from the intersection layout screen. An issue where in time-space diagram bands would pass through a red bar is also resolved. We investigated the issue and we found out that practically those bands were positioned correctly. However, the indication of red and green in certain instances would be placed incorrectly. So we made a modification, and you should be able to see now correct placement of all red and green colors, and band placement was, and it will continue to be correct in the time-space diagram. Also, the CAD incident feed issue is resolved for one of you who use the CAD incident feed to automatically add incidents to your ATMS. And there was an issue with permissions to show the legend in the Bing map view. That is also corrected. So basically, if that is disabled, the user will not be able to see legend at all. If enabled, legend will become available again in the Bing map view. So I try to be very concise. So I leave time for your questions. So let me see if there are any questions I can answer, and practically see how many do we have. I can see a few questions, so let me try to answer that. First one is, for turning movement labels, is it possible to add northwest through southeast left? It is absolutely possible. Let me just go back. If I go back to one of the intersection layout screens, just give me the opportunity to scroll back. 8 approaches are defined. So basically, it is predefined. You can have intersection with up to 8 approaches, which means north, northwest, northeast. Give me just 1 second to go back to the location where we had, I think we should be there. Where is it? Intersection layout. Okay, yeah, this is a good example over here. You see on the right-hand side, there are predefined movements: northbound, northwest bound, westbound, southwest bound, southbound, etc. So you can create up to 8 approaches per intersection. There is no need to create a custom label. Next question is, can the curbside be turned off during green light and on during red light in the same approach? Yes, however, that is not controlled through the intersection layout. Basically, in order to control when the detectors and the controllers will log that information, there is configuration that has to happen on the controller itself. You can program that by working the controller directly or through ATMS, but that will not, that is not defined through the intersection layout. So basically, you specify that the detector number N will collect volumes only when phase number, let's say 6, is green or yellow, and that is handled outside of intersection layout. Intersection layout is basically to describe the geometry and the phase detector to lane, to approach, to phase, to intersection mapping. I hope that answers the question. If not, please feel free to follow up with another question. Can you show me what the V76 Fresno template looks like? It looks identically how it looked before. It looks that there are no changes. I believe I showed you this some time back when we had one of the meetings. There were no changes in terms of visuals. The only thing that had to be changed is basically formulas to use different formulas to search for parameters, no matter where they are in the spreadsheet. To get the PED report working, do we need to make any modifications in the controller? You would need to enable these alarms. If alarm number 35 is not enabled in the controller, ATMS unfortunately will not see that and will not be able to generate the report. So that would be a prerequisite. Naturally, you would need to have some sort of detection that will be capable of identifying if pedestrian is still at the crosswalk at the time where the flashing don't walk indication would stop. So I hope that answered your question. Which version does this supersede? 2.9? Yes, I mean for ATMS we have major and let's say minor or dot releases. So for 2.9 we had a couple of sub releases. After 2.9 there was 2.9.1, 2.9.2, and now this is the next major release, 2.10. Which will be followed by point releases afterwards. We're actually planning one for later this year as well. Let me see, do we have more questions? Would the split history reports now also show the offset values for each cycle? Offset values are not added to the split history reports. I don't believe I stated that during the presentation. So offset values are not part of split history reports. Okay, what else do we have? Questions. Has the negative split value been addressed? Actually, it has, but not in ATMS. That was an issue with the controller software. Certain controller software versions had issue with creating negative split values if the controller software version gets updated, that negative split value should not be happening anymore. Let me see. And there is a second question: can different user group be given different permission to access report? Basically, there is no separation of permissions inside of a particular report. Basically, there is permissions currently handle access to reports, but if you have access to the extension report, we do not provide any more specific, let's say, more specific permissions on the report level itself. I hope that answers the question. There is a question: is there a conversion tool from ATC to Scout? I hope you're referring to from V76. There is work that happened already, and there is a standalone tool for converting. Our intention is to integrate it in ATMS, and one of the following versions of ATMS will have that option incorporated. Okay, couple of questions on the IP camera. Can I access different types of camera besides GRIDSMART? I mean, there is an option to add an IP camera and program the IP. However, what ATMS would do in that case, it will basically launch a browser and take browser to the IP, to the location of the IP address that is programmed for that particular device. Anything that happens after that point, ATMS would not handle, which means if there is some specific codec or specific protocol that has to be used, ATMS would basically not handle those. It would basically take you to the IP location of a camera, and if that camera type can display the video feed by basically just visiting the IP address, then absolutely you should be able to do that. I think that answers two questions that we have. Let me see what else. In the future, can you add or enable? Let me see. Can you add or enable the ability to view Easycalc in ATMS? That's a good point. However, I would have to check with my colleagues from the controller software team. I am not sure if they're going to continue with Easycalcs for Scout. So it's a good question. Let me follow up on that. And depending on what their plans are, we may consider it. Let me see what else. PED extension report tied with dedicated PED phase, or it's applicable for all PED phase, means how much time in the PED phase was active. Basically, when you want to generate a PED extension report, you have two options. You can say, show me all phases. So if an extension happened for any pedestrian phase, those extensions will be displayed. However, you have an option to generate a report that will focus on only one or few phases. So you have that option too. Let me see what else. What else? Can we view the archive databases later using ATMS? I'm not sure I understand completely what is the question. You should be able to view the archive databases even today. A change that will happen that is not part of the ATMS 2.10, but it will happen in the future version of ATMS that I can say is that as part of the incorporating the conversion tool from older controller software to ATMS, we will make certain changes in the process of how the controller software types are being replaced in ATMS. We are aware that that process is not very straightforward, and occasionally it causes certain let's say tedious work or issues where you cannot access the archive databases on the same way you could prior to the upgrade. So we will we will practically address that in the future if that was what the question was about. What else? Follow-up question. We use safety clear to provide extension where the extension request input comes into a dummy phase 1 for phase 2, dummy phase 3 for phase 4. Okay, so in this particular case, I mean, the controller internally is supposed to generate the alarm which phase was extended. If phase 2 was extended, that is what ATMS will see. Now, depending on your programming, I would probably have to see what kind of IO logic you have programmed and how it is connected for your particular use case, which may change the way how controller logs these alarms. But if phase 2 is extended, then there is an internal entry that the controller will make, and alarm will see that. If controller logs that for a different phase, in case you made certain modifications, then that is something that we would have to take a look into. What are the differences between V80 and Scout, and encryption security can be open to third party, like share SPAT data? There, basically V80 is a separate version for a specific customer in your case. Scout is the general version of controller software. And basically the sharing the SPAT data is available, will be available with Scout naturally. You have the option of enabling the SRC module and share data in that way if you're talking about, let's say, local data sharing to RSUs and OBUs. And there is a second option of sharing data on the system level, where an ATMS module like Tidal Wave can be leveraged, and the data from, let's say, a group of or all controllers in the system will be collected and provided to a data subscriber. Any plans to give Synchro Green a UX that is more consistent with the rest of ATMS? I cannot speak to that. There is a basically separate group that works on Synchro Green. I'm not part of that group, so I cannot really provide any details. I know that they are making certain modifications in Synchro Green, but are they related to UX or something else at this point? I'm not really plugged in, so I would not be able to answer. And the last one, on the split history report for the 85th percentile value, does it neglect any zero split? We're trying to time the signals. Yes, basically, if there is a zero split, that means the phase was not even active. If you, let's say, have only 4 phases programmed, you will have all the remaining 12 or 28 phases, depending on which controller you're using, showing zeros all the time. So basically, there are no values for that. That means that the split was not even assigned for that particular phase or that particular time. Okay, that is the last one, I believe. Let me see, where are we with time? We are good, actually. Managed to answer all the questions in a timely manner. Are there any last questions you would like to ask? There was a question about the Fresno template. So if you would like to know more about it, feel free to contact me directly. I do not want to basically use this webinar as an opportunity to go into details about something that is not directly related to ATMS at the time, if that makes sense.
Okay, Danilo, I think that's it with the questions. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and we'll send a follow-up email to you with resources and the recording.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice rest of the day.